He's mentally ill, my wife shouted in open court. Not whispered. Not implied. Shouted, for the entire courtroom to hear. Gasps rippled through the gallery. The judge raised an eyebrow. Her attorney buried his face in his notes. But she wasn't done. My mother-in-law stood next. She pointed at me with trembling hands and said, "Marrying my daughter to this fool was the biggest mistake of my life. I ruined her future with my own hands." It wasn't rage. It was regret. Not for her behavior, but for ever letting me into their precious family. And I remained silent. My name is Noah Brenner, and that was the moment I realized I wasn't fighting for my marriage anymore. I was fighting for the last scrap of my dignity. We were in divorce court. 5 years of marriage. No kids. No property battle. Just character assassination dressed up in designer clothing and legal briefs. They had claimed I was unstable, dangerous, emotionally erratic. I had struggled with depression once, after my brother died. I went to therapy. I got help. I told her everything back when we still shared things like trust and quiet Sunday mornings. Now she was weaponizing my openness to win a court settlement. The judge turned to her and asked one line that broke the room. "Do you really not understand who he is?" Her face froze. The lawyer beside her stiffened. Because what they didn't know was that the judge knew me, personally, from years ago. From a case I'd helped settle as a volunteer advocate for victims of abuse. The same courtroom I now sat in as the accused. And in that second the ground shifted. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The silence after the judge's question stretched so long, you could hear a pen roll off someone's table. "Do you really not understand who he is?" My wife blinked. "Excuse me?" The judge looked directly at her, not angry, not even disappointed. Just tired. The kind of tired that comes from seeing the same performance too many times from too many people who think they're clever. I've seen this before. A person takes someone kind, vulnerable, honest, and they use those qualities like weapons against them. Until the story gets rewritten and the kind one becomes the crazy one. Her lawyer tried to object. "Your Honor, we weren't aware of any prior." The judge cut him off. "You should have looked closer." Then she looked at me and said, "Mr. Brenner, I remember the Prescott hearing. You were one of the only civilians who testified, even when it wasn't safe. I remember you." My wife's face cracked. Not shattered, cracked. Like the mask she'd worn for so long didn't quite fit anymore. She glanced at her lawyer. He leaned in, whispered something. She nodded, then turned to the judge. "I didn't mean it like that. I was upset." I still said nothing. Because here's the truth, I didn't come to court to convince anyone I was stable. I came to show them I wasn't going to let her define me anymore. Not with lies. Not with pity. Not with performative tears. And outside that courtroom I had been preparing. I had character statements from former co-workers. Medical records showing my therapy and clearance. Evidence of her controlling behavior. And a document her lawyer hadn't seen yet, one that would change the direction of this trial completely. Because when you try to rewrite someone's life, you better hope they haven't kept receipts. The morning after the hearing, I received an email from her attorney's office. Attached is a summary of requested exhibits for court review. Please confirm receipt. I opened the file just to be thorough. And there it was, a PDF she wasn't supposed to include. An accidental upload, buried 2 pages deep in a batch of scanned documents. A journal entry. Handwritten. Uploaded and converted by her phone's notes app. The title? Plan. Divorce timeline, mental fitness angle. My heart slowed as I read. In her own words, she detailed how she would isolate me by leveraging my therapy records. Use my grief over my brother's death to suggest instability. Plant stories with friends about my erratic behavior. Claim she feared for her emotional safety. Then file quietly, expecting I wouldn't be prepared. She even wrote, "If I push the mental health angle hard enough, the court will back off. He'll fold. He always does." That file was timestamped 3 weeks before she served me papers. I forwarded it to my lawyer without comment. Then I printed a copy, slid it into an envelope and dropped it off, personally, to the judge's clerk with a simple note attached. Submitted for integrity review, per your Honor's open concern regarding character. Later that evening, I received a call from a mutual friend. "She's spiraling," they said. "Says you set her up." I hadn't. She played herself. I had just waited. And now, the one card she thought would break me, had become the exact evidence that exposed everything. By the time we returned to court, the atmosphere had shifted. Her attorney looked subdued. "My calm. The judge?" stone-faced, but his tone was sharper than before. This court has reviewed new supplemental material submitted post-hearing. Before we proceed, I'd like to call a character witness forward, he said. Her lawyer blinked. Your Honor, may I ask who submitted? The door opened. Rachel Prescott stepped in. Same Rachel from the old domestic abuse case I'd testified in years ago. Back then she was just trying to survive a violent husband. Now she was a counselor for women's shelters and a community speaker. She looked directly at me as she approached the stand, then at my wife, and something in her eyes told me she already knew everything. Rachel, the judge asked, can you speak to Mr. Brenner's stability and character under stress? She nodded. I was terrified to speak up during my own case. Noah was the only civilian witness who showed up, every day. He drove 2 hours just to support me and 3 other women in court. He never asked for credit. Never made it about him. I didn't know him well, but I trusted him. And I've never once seen him act without integrity. My wife's face turned to stone. Her attorney whispered furiously in her ear. Then came the judge's words. In light of the recent journal evidence and this testimony, the court will reconsider its initial posture regarding the respondent's claims of instability. That was the moment she realized her strategy had collapsed. Not because I fought loud, but because I stood still long enough for the truth to catch up to her. And it had. After Rachel's testimony, the courtroom settled into a strange, fragile quiet. The kind of silence that creeps in when performance dies and truth takes its first breath. The judge turned to my wife. Would you like to respond? He asked, giving her one final rope. She rose slowly, smoothing her blouse. That carefully measured posture she always used when she was about to charm a crowd, it looked rehearsed now. Hollow. She cleared her throat. I never meant to hurt him. Things between us had been unraveling for a long time. I was afraid that if I didn't take control of the narrative, I'd be left with nothing. I panicked. She tried for tears. One fell. I stayed seated. Because I wasn't there for theater. I was there for the record. The judge raised an eyebrow. You panicked, and so you fabricated a mental health breakdown to secure advantage in family court? Her lips parted, then closed. Her lawyer reached out, placing a hand on her arm. A subtle, silent plea to stop talking. But it was too late. I stood finally. Not to retaliate, just to submit. I'd like to present Exhibit 17, Your Honor, I said. An email exchange between my wife and her friend, discussing the best phrases to use in court to paint me unstable but not enough for a psych hold. It's from 2 months ago. I handed the bailiff the envelope. The judge took it, read silently for nearly a minute, then closed it. Thank you, Mr. Brenner. And with that, he announced the court would adjourn until final ruling, to be delivered the following week. My wife didn't look back as she left. Her mask was gone. And all that was left was the damage she did to herself. The courtroom was packed when the final hearing resumed. Attorneys on both sides. Court reporters. Even a few local journalists in the back row, likely tipped off by someone on her side hoping for sympathy coverage. She wore white. The kind of white reserved for weddings or apologies. I wore gray. Neutral. Quiet. The judge entered with no expression. He sat, reviewed the file, looked at us and spoke with measured, deliberate calm. This court has reviewed all submitted evidence, including journal entries, character testimonies, digital communications, and voluntary admissions made under oath. My wife shifted in her seat. Based on this, the court finds clear and convincing evidence of premeditated misrepresentation of the respondent's mental state with intent to manipulate legal outcomes and public perception. She flinched. Accordingly, all claims filed by the petitioner, including requests for spousal support, joint property claims, and emotional damages, are hereby denied. Her lawyer blinked twice. No objections. Just silence. Furthermore, the judge continued, the court awards the respondent full ownership of the marital residence, exemption from shared debt, and restoration of personal assets that were previously frozen under false claims. I didn't move. Not even to breathe. He looked at her one last time. Ms. Brenner, courts exist not only to protect the vulnerable, but to protect truth itself. Your actions sought to exploit both. This court recommends you consider that. Bang of the gavel. It was over. She walked past me in the hallway without a word. Her heels were too loud for the stillness she left behind. Later that evening, I opened the last document from my lawyer. It was titled, Final Judgment, Restitution of Character. It wasn't just legal closure. It was a written reminder. She tried to bury me with lies. And I let her dig her own grave, with her own words. By the following week, her social media pages had changed. Gone were the vacation photos, the filtered beach shots, the inspirational quotes about healing and freedom. Now it was all quiet. A blank profile picture. A private account. No recent activity. Because her story wasn't working anymore. The mutual friends we shared? Most of them stopped calling her. Some messaged me privately. I had no idea it got that bad. She told us you were unstable. She lied to everyone. I didn't respond to most. Not out of pride, but because I didn't need validation anymore. The best part of truth? It travels without a microphone. And once it lands, it doesn't need defending. I got an email that week from Rachel Prescott, the witness from court. She wrote, "I've seen women like her before. They weaponize mental health not to protect themselves but to rewrite reality. You standing there in silence, letting the truth do the damage, that takes strength most people never find." Attached was a flyer for a small nonprofit. She was building something new, something I might want to help with. That night, I walked through the house and noticed how quiet it finally felt. Not empty. Peaceful. In the drawer beside my bed, I found an old sticky note from my brother. The one I kept tucked between books for years. "Don't let anyone turn your pain into their spotlight." I smiled, folded it carefully and slid it back. She tried to make me the villain. But I didn't fight back with noise. I waited. Prepared. Documented. Let her own words bury her. And in the end, that silence was louder than anything she screamed in court. A month after the final ruling, I was invited to speak at a local support group for men recovering from emotionally abusive relationships. I almost said no. I'm not a public speaker. I'm a quiet man. I don't like retelling trauma for sport. But something about standing in front of people who've been through the same quiet war felt necessary. I told them what I didn't tell the courtroom. How shame creeps in through cracks people leave in your name. How easy it is to doubt yourself when someone you love starts rewriting your story, one lie at a time. How terrifying it is to realize your silence has become their weapon. And then I told them what I learned. That silence can be reclaimed. That stillness can be strength. That when the world wants to hear your scream, sometimes the best thing you can do is whisper with the weight of truth behind you. Afterward, a man in his late 60s approached me. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped mine and said, "You didn't just defend yourself. You taught us how to stay upright when they try to crush you sideways." Back at home, I walked into the kitchen and found an envelope on the table. A letter from the judge. Inside was a certificate. Judicial recognition of voluntary court advocacy. Signed. Stamp. Simple. He remembered what I did for Rachel all those years ago. You stood for others when no one stood for you. And when it was your turn, you didn't run. You rose. I pinned the certificate next to my brother's old guitar. And for the first time since this all began, I didn't feel like I'd survived something. I felt like I'd ended it. With truth. With quiet. With no blood spilled, just lies undone.